as much, being only 6 years old. I was just went along my business and playing, and in Vienna at the time people didn't have refrigerators, so I went food shopping with my mother every morning, and which passed the morning. And in the afternoon I would play, and my mother would be sitting and sewing, and I would sit right next to her on a little bench and sew some stuff for my dolls and keep busy.
How was the food situation?
The food situation was, we had less food because, like I said, we didn't have much savings, and my mother used that money to buy the ticket for my father to go to Shanghai. I don't remember being hungry in Vienna. My grandmother would bring stuff over too. I think we had sufficient food, nothing fancy, but sufficient at the time.
And what kind of allotment were you allowed? What kind of ration cards did you have to use?
They just had started with that you can only have like a half a loaf of bread, or maybe a pound of meat per week, or not very much, so we ate a lot of non-meatless dishes.
And so then when did you see your father again?
The next time I saw my father, when my mother and my sister and I, well, the story goes really, my father had to leave before, my father left and went to Italy. He stayed in Italy about a few months, and Mussolini started chasing all the Jewish people out of there. So he crossed the border again to Yugoslavia on foot, under bad conditions in the winter time. And he wrote to us from Yugoslavia, "This is where I am, and try and come over if you can." But I jumped a little bit ahead of myself. When my father was still in Italy, my brother was being threatened. He was at the time 17, and we're going to come and get you. So he crossed the border and went to Italy and met up with my father. Then my brother and my father crossed the border to Italy. And once they were in Italy, they wrote to us and, crossed the border to Yugoslavia. Once he was in Yugoslavia with my brother, he wrote to us and said, "Would you try and come and bring my mother?" Now, Grandma didn't want to hear about it. She said, "I'm an old woman, nobody's going to touch me, nobody's going to take me to concentration camp." And my mother said to her, "Look, Mama, they took your apartment away."
When did they do that?
They took her apartment. They said, "You're an old woman, you don't need the whole apartment by yourself."
When was that?
In 1939. And she came to live with us. So she was with us, and my mother tried to persuade her to come with us. She was an elderly woman. It would have been tough for her to come by foot across the border. No, I'm an elderly woman, nobody's going to touch me, I'm staying here, this is my home." So she stayed in our apartment. And the next time we heard from her was one postcard from Mattenhausen. They took her to the concentration camp. And that was it, we never heard again.
What did she write?
She just wrote a few words, "This is where I am, and I'm well," and kisses and goodbye, and that was said on the card. So my mother and my sister and my mother got in touch with some kind of a man who took people across the border, had to pay him quite a bit of money. They took us in a car with some other people to a certain point at night, 1939. And up in a mountain, he said to us, "Now it's time to get out of the car, and you have to do the rest of the way by foot." So we all got out of the car. I think we were 6 people.
Who else was with you?
Another family, not children, just grown-ups.
What names do you remember?
I don't remember their names. I didn't even know them. This was just, we had to be quiet. We couldn't talk at all in the car, because if anybody heard, had to be silence.
What do you remember taking with you when you left home?
Well, my mother packed a little suitcase. We had, my sister and I, we had jogging suits, like exercise suits. She took that for us to be comfortable while we were crossing the border. And she took just a couple of dresses and went out and bought new shoes for us. because she figured these kids are growing, they should have new shoes. Well, I wore my new shoes, and when we had to walk across the border in the snow at night, my bones in the back of my foot were sore down to where they were bleeding. That's how bad it was. And I sat down on the snow and I said to my mother, I can't walk anymore. My feet are bleeding. Well, you have to walk, we can't help that. So she put a handkerchief around my foot, that's all she had, and she said, you have to keep on walking, we have to walk, and we have to walk fast, and we can't talk. So we walked the whole night, and we finally made it across the border.
And where were you when
Next
you...
morning, we got to Zagreb, Yugoslavia.
What time of the year was it?
It was, I think it was February. Yeah.
February.
It was cold.
February what year?
1939, end of, yeah. 1939.
And so when you got to Zagreb, what happened?
My father and brother were in a small town called Samobor, which was next to Zagreb. And I don't recall how we got to, we must have taken a bus or a train or whatever, how we got to Samobor. This completely escapes my mind, but we got to meet my father finally and my brother. And there was an organization, we were about 30 people, and they placed everybody in small rooms or apartments, and they supplied us with food because nobody was working, nobody had any money.
What kind of organization was it?
It was Jüdische Gemeinde, it was called, which was a Jewish organization.
And how many other Jewish people had left their homes that you saw when you got to Samobor?
I think we were about a group of 30 people.
And
That
where
came
had
from
they,
all different parts of the world.
where did they come from?
Some escaped from Austria, some from Germany. I would say mostly German people.
And
They
so,
all spoke German.
and then what happened to you?
So we stayed in this little, I think it was a 2-room apartment for a few months, and they supplied us with food, and things seemed to be very relaxing. Nobody was bothering us. We were fine until Tito announced that the Germans are coming into Yugoslavia. Well, then we had to start running. And this whole group of us started running into the woods. And in the woods, of course, it was still cold and a lot of snow, and all we had was one blanket for the 5 of us. So we would share this one blanket, and one would tug and the other one would pull, you know, in the winter time.
Where did you go in the woods?
It was just wooded area to Gatsko, which was a very desolate area in Herzegovina. I have never seen such a godforsaken place in my life. There was no vegetation, nothing, just mountains, just bare mountains. And the peasants there were really kind to us. They were very poor themselves. But they would give us, all they had was sheep and black coffee, believe it or not. And no salt, no sugar, no vegetables or fruit, anything. So about 6 weeks we lived on mutton, lamb cooked in water with no salt and black coffee, and all 30 of us got dysentery, got terribly sick. So we decided, well, we have to get out of here. So we continued running, and we ran into the partisan army occasionally, and they were kind of poor too. They didn't have much. Their feet were bandaged with rags. They didn't have any shoes. That's how they would walk in the snow.
How dangerous was it for you being there in the woods with the partisans?
Well, the partisans were on our side, so that was fine, as long as we didn't encounter the Ustascha, which was the Yugoslavian army.
And on what
The
occasion?
partisan was the underground, you know, they were with us.
On what occasion did you encounter the Yugoslavian army?
Well, we did occasionally, and then they would get a hold of us and take us into camp and lock us up.
And what happened then when they locked you up?
Well, they would keep us there and give us very, very little food, just hardly to survive. And sometimes in Yugoslavia at the time the winters were so severe, so cold, that they had to withdraw, they had to pull back. So they would just leave us there. And we would make our way out of the building, whatever it was, there are silos, mostly silos, and start running into the woods again, figuring that's where we are safe, that's where the Germans are not going to find us. But we were wrong, of course. They caught up with us every once in a while. And if they caught up with us, they would take us. And on one occasion, they really took the whole group and put us on army trucks and took us to a railroad station and put us in cattle cars. And I'll never forget these small little windows in the cattle cars, and I'm trying, my brother should boost me up so I can look out, and the snow was just coming down like crazy. I mean, it snowed the whole night. The German army withdrew and left us there to die. They just left us.
Where were you when you were in the cattle car?
It was a railroad station someplace. I don't recall. We didn't even know the name of the town where we were. They just took us with those trucks. Well, we had a bunch of men in the cattle cars, and they somehow or other, very ingenious people, opened up those cars, broke the wood or whatever it was and the steel, and we got out of there. And we started running, running the different directions than the Germans were going, so we get away from them. And again, we were in the woods.
And where were you getting food?
Well, you pick a few berries, you run into the partisans and say to them, look, my mother spoke Polish, so she could converse with them. By that time, we picked up a little bit of the language. The children are hungry, do you have a piece of bread for them? So they would break off a piece of bread and give it to us. And my mother said, no, you can't have it now. This is for before you go to bed, so you don't go to bed hungry, so you can sleep. And that's how we kept running. Occasionally we'd go into a village. Now, I even today can imagine how these village people took 5 people. We had to separate from the group at that point. Everybody ran into a different direction. It was too dangerous to run together. So we figured we separate. 5 of us stayed together. How these people in a one-room house took us in, gave us a spot on the floor, put some hay down for us. We still had that warm blanket. And we would be able to sleep there. What was happening though, at that point we were filthy, dirty, we were full of lice. So our daily occupation, which is not nice to say, would be to delouse us. We would delouse each other. We would take off each other's tops or clothes and just kill those lice. And the main thing was the hair. Us girls had beautiful thick hair. And my mother would do one of us girls. We would do her head. She would. This was the daily occupation, to sit and kill the eggs from the lice. My mother saw that this is not going to be good. We are starving to death here. I mean, the peasants were poor, like I said, themselves, and they would give us a little bit of cornmeal and make a little tin soup for breakfast out of the cornmeal, no salt. Save the rest for evening, make it a little bit thicker, so we have a little bit more nourishment at night. And this is how we stayed in this one place. The man's name was Ilya. He was a tall, slim man, and he would come, he had a wood-burning stove. We were on one side of the room, it was a one-room house, on the hay, and he had a young daughter and his wife. They would be on the other side, all sleeping in one bed.
What was his last name?
I don't remember that. All I remember is Ilya. And they had a hope chest, which was standing right next to the hay where we were sleeping. So I come down with yellow jaundice at the time. I got sick. My eyes turned yellow and I got sick. So they were very nice. They went to the neighbors who had a cow, got a little bit of milk for me, let me sleep on the hope chest so I don't catch a cold. And it took a few weeks and I got better. In the meantime, again, winter time, the little house is covered to the roof with snow. In order to get some drinking water or wash our hands or something, we had to just pry the door open a little bit, take some snow in, and melt it on the stove. And that's how we washed and had water, just washed up. You couldn't get undressed to wash. We were all in one room.
What medication did you have for the yellow
Nothing.
jaundice?
Nothing. Just God was with me.
How long did you stay in this house with Ilya and
The
his
whole
family?
winter, actually, until it started. And in Yugoslavia, the winters are so severe at the time. In those years, the snow wouldn't start melting till about beginning of May. Once the snow started melting, we had to leave again.
What year was that?
1941.
What happened between 1939 and 1941?
Well, mostly running in the woods, village to village. Like I said, the cattle cub, we were there, and just from village to village.
And when you did meet the partisans, where were they from? Who were the partisans?
It was an underground army that was fighting tried to stay with the Russians if possible.
What countries were they from?
They all spoke Slavish. So I imagine they were from Yugoslavia. They just didn't want to join the Ustasha. There was the other group.
And so then, when did you have to leave Ilya's house and why?
The Germans were coming in. Somebody tipped us off. The Germans are coming through. They're coming with airplanes and bombing. You better get out of here. So we packed up our little blanket. And at the time, children grew and we didn't have any more clothes or any more shoes. So the peasants over there, they wear in the winter time, it's on one of my pictures, these slippers made out of yarn, and on the bottom for soles they put cowhide and sewed it on. So my mother made all of us these slippers by hand. So we had something on our feet to walk in the snow. The problem is when the snow melts and there's water and these knitted things get wet and we're flopping around with these wet shoes in the cold, icy water. It is really such a miracle that we're here. It's just mind-boggling.
What do you
Anyway, going back to my story. We escaped again, went to the woods. We met up again with some people, and we got together with them. They were also running. And there were some elderly people in the group. We would get together and pick some berries, or whoever had a little bit of food, and cook together on an open fire, naturally. And then they would tell us, no, you have to put the fire out. If you see that fire, they're going to come and look for you. So it was very hard even to cook something. But when we managed to cook sometimes at night a little bit, my sister and I had a little business going. We took all the dishes from these older people and took them down to the stream. There was a stream, and we had no soap or dishwash or any powder to do the. We would take sand and scrub the dishes clean. And when we brought them back clean, the people, if they had a few pennies, they would give us a little bit of money. Well, we saved up a little bit of money, and to the next village that we came, there was a store that was selling little fabrics. And my mother picked up some printed material, and by hand she made my sister and I and herself each a dress. Because here we are already now, it's summertime, and we have no clothes. We have outgrown it. Not even speaking of underwear, forget that. We didn't have any more underwear either. Everything fell apart, everything. My poor father, his pants were ripped. My brother's pants were short. My mother cut them off, made him shorts. No clothes.
You was a young child. Why did you think all this was going on? What did you think this was happening?
I knew there
Why?
was a war and we had to run. And the bombs were falling. you know, the aeroplanes would come around and just circle. If they saw us running, they would really scoop down and circle and try and bomb us. At one point, we were walking, just the five of us, and we came upon a house, and we went into this house, and the lady had a small child. And she asked my sister, who was a teenager, would you watch the baby? I have to run out and get something. So we're in the house, and the aeroplanes are just flying and bombing. So we ran out of the house and ran into a ditch. And we're laying in the ditch, and the bombs are falling left and right. My parents are on top of us kids, trying to protect us. And my sister is crying. She says, I left the baby in the house. She gets out of the ditch and she runs while they're shooting at her from above, and she rescues this baby, and the minute she took that baby out of the house, the whole house blew up in flames. She took that baby and brought it into the ditch with us. The planes were still flying and bombing and kept going for hours. Finally they left. They must have ran out of bombs. We got up, we got out, and this poor woman came to collect her child. And of course she said, you know, this was a miracle. So again, this was a dangerous area. We packed up our little blanket and kept on going.
What happened to the lady with her baby?
She was okay. She went to her relatives to live because her house was blown up, you know.
And what did she give you when you left?
I don't think she had anything to give, really. I don't remember that. Maybe she did give my sister something.
How was it for you at night?
Scary. Scary.
What dreams were you having then?
Oh, I probably had dreams. I was always scared. I was the one who was mostly scared because I was the youngest. My brother also. And he would sit in the woods a whole day and not come down into the village. Now my mother says, well, he's up there in the woods hungry probably. You girls have to go and bring him something to eat. So my sister and I, with a little dish or whatever we had there, brought him some lunch up to the woods, and he ate his lunch, and we would leave again. Just prancing along in the woods. And he was so scared. He was just so frightened. He wouldn't come down until it was nighttime.
What did he tell you?
He just told me, thank you for bringing me the food, and I'm staying here until it gets dark.
And how was it that you were able to help him? How were you comforting him, being that you were the youngest?
Yeah, I just felt that I'm helping him by bringing him something to eat, which was great. And I figured, I'm so small that the planes can't see me. I'll walk.
And so then what happened after that?
Well, we continued on, running again. Then we came to a place called, we were in a place called Chaplin in a camp where they locked us up. We were in a place, Kupari. We were in a place, Mirnovets, where we were locked up. Again, there were a lot of people that they gathered up into this big silo, where there was no more hay or straw or anything, just a cement floor where we were sleeping on.
Who locked you up there?
The Ustascha. And the Germans were very close by. In that silo, the rats were about this size, and the rats would just try and bite us and run over us at night. So what we would try and do is get under this blanket over our head so we would be safe from the rats. And during the day, the men would find some sticks and put a nail on it, and we go around stabbing these things. In the morning, if anybody had a coat, they would get up and put their hand into their coat pockets, and there were newborn baby rats in there. That's what we all encountered every morning.
And how was that for you?
That was scary. I was really afraid of those animals because they were hungry, because the silo was empty. They had no more food. So they were trying to attack the people.
And
it
on
was
what?
quite scary. We couldn't get out of there. We were locked in.
How many people were with you?
I think it was about a group of 60 people at the time in this big silo.
Where were they from?
All different, some from France, some from Austria, from Germany mostly, all Jewish people that escaped.
How did you communicate with one another?
Most of them spoke German.
And who was guarding you at that time?
Outside was the Ustascher with their guns.
And where were most of those people from?
The people that were in the silo.
The people that were guarding you, where were they from?
Oh, the Ustascher, they were Yugoslavian young men. That was the army.
And who was in charge of them?
Oh, they had captains and they had their superiors, which you never got to see. I know they had them because we would hear the voices giving them commands.
What did you hear the commanding officers say?
No, they changed guards, they changed who's on duty now, they put your gun on your shoulder, stuff like that. The silo was really almost enclosed. There were just small little windows on top with mesh. So we would boost each other up to see what's going on outside. If there's daylight, if it's nighttime, what's going on? Is it snowing? Is it raining?
And what time of the year was it?
This was in the spring.
How long were you there?
We were there a couple of months.
On what occasion did the rats attack?
Whenever they could.
Who was attacked in your group by these rats?
Some of the people were bit, nobody in my family.
And what happened to the people who were bitten?
I don't know what happened to them later. When we dispersed, everybody again ran a different direction.
How were you dispersed?
I think what was happening, they needed the soldiers, so they withdrew them to some other parts. And we somehow or other got out. It's really incredible.
What do you remember about getting out? What do you remember about
Seeing daylight again. It was just wonderful just seeing daylight. You know, being cooped up in a place like this.
how were the men able to escape from the silo? What tools or what method or?
Oh, they found a crowbar here and there and they would pry things open. You know, stuff like that.
How long did it take them to open up?
I really don't know, but it must have taken them quite a while. This was a pretty well-built, solid cement silo.
We're going to change tape. Mrs. Berry, we were just talking about being in the silo and escaping. Before we do that, how many people did you say were with you?
I would say about 60 approximately.
And approximately how many rats would you think were in that silo?
Oh, in the hundreds. Unbelievable.
So what kind of nightmares did you have when you went to sleep?
I don't know if we slept very much. Somebody was always guarding to see that everybody's safe, that not being attacked. But there were like ridges on top where they would sit, and then we would watch if they're coming down. They were just running wild.
How did you You did tell me how you communicated with the other people. What kind of food did you have to eat? You said you were there a couple of months.
Yeah, there was some grain there that we found in the corners, and we would grind it up, like, stamp on it and try and make something out of it, mix it with a little water. There was water there in the silo. That's all we had. I mean, and we were like, when my mother came out of the concentration camp, she weighed 45 kilo, which is less than 90 pounds. She was like a skeleton, and my father too. And I was a skinny kid to begin with, so I was like skin and bones.
How hungry were you?
All the time. We were hungry all the time. I don't remember in 4 or 5 years not having the feeling of not being hungry.
How were the people in the silo able to wash themselves?
Well, like I said, we did have a little water, so just wash your face and hands.
What problem did you have with lice there?
Also lice throughout the whole time. That was the biggest problem. But that was our daily occupation. We would have gone crazy if we didn't have the lousing ourselves.
What kind of conversations were you having with your family?
Well, like I said, being I wasn't in school, my father would make it a ritual and sit down every morning with me and my sister. My brother was already out of school. And he managed to have a little piece of paper or find a little piece of cardboard or something and a pencil and teach us a little bit of arithmetic, the timetable. I mean, I was illiterate. I didn't know how to write, read, do arithmetic or nothing.